But the Bible is against magic and sorcery and witchcraft. Is it? Let's talk about it. So one thing I like to do is I like to go to original sources and I like to deep dive and analyze them. And I like to reference original, non-translated sources and really pick apart words and their definitions. So of course, being someone who's, I guess, a lay scholar, somebody who's self-taught and kind of does this thing on his own as a hobby, I'm not necessarily perfect in my interpretations. So, if you are Christian or no Christians, or if you are a biblical scholar, I wouldn't mind hearing your opinion on my opinion. Let's talk about passages that are often cited as sources for showing the Bible is against to or counterproductive to magic or witchcraft or what most people call neo-paganism today. Modern polytheistic paths are reconstructions and revivals because those paths are pretty much dead and gone. Now, if you actually dig into some of those old paths, there's a reason why many of them are called evil or bad by a lot of the Christians of the olden times. There's a reason for it. There honestly is. And if you want, I can cover that in a future video. But for this video, I want to talk about whether or not the Bible is actually telling Christians that magic and witches and all that are actually evil and bad. It's not. And here's my proof. So let's talk about a few passages here. So I have notes. I'm going to reference some notes for you. To begin with, one of the first passages is, of course, Exodus 22, specifically 18. The verse is often translated as, "Thou shalt not suffer a sorceress to live," or "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." But this originally was in Hebrew. So if we go to the original Hebrew, the word that is being translated into witch or sorcerer is in fact mekhasefa. I don't speak Hebrew. So if you speak Hebrew, there's a different word. What was that word and what did those people actually do in biblical times? Because I've got a news flash for you. The word witch and sorcerer didn't exist in that region of the world during that period in time. So we can't be talking about the same thing. The question is, can we apply it to the way it's being translated today? And that, of course, depends on who you speak with, because some people argue yes, others will say nay. So let's talk about a few of these things. With this word, looking at what some of them might have done, and if you look historically at what this mekhasefa, there's a male and female version, what they might have done. They were often associated with potions and herbs and spells, but a lot of those had to do with blinding people, confusing them, giving them terror or fear, poison, intoxication, bad things. And then they were also associated with calling up spirits and demons. Now, is it possible they were calling up something that wasn't a demon and the Christians called it a demon? It is possible. What we are talking about, over 2,000 years ago, right? We're talking about biblical times where a lot of this stuff would have been happening. So I don't know the exact details of those. And I'm kind of curious if anybody today would really be comfortable trying to call up or summon the same things as they were doing back then. They also did a lot of things with raw biological matter. We're talking like blood and actual disembowelment in some cases, depending on the region and area. So we're talking about stuff that by today's standards, including by today neo-pagan standards, we would consider bad, evil, or just not good, or things that you wouldn't want to practice. So my point of this is bringing up the fact that even though we translate it to mean sorcerer or witch, the sorceresses and witches, the self-proclaimed sorceresses and witches of today, are not doing the same practices as the people the Bible was referring to. That's my first argument. The next one, and we're not going to go through all of them, the next one is Revelations 21:8. But as for cowards, the unfaithful, the deprived, murderers, the unchaste, sorcerers, or witches, idol worshippers, deceivers of every sort. Now, idol worshippers can technically be projected and put onto pagans or heathens, modern polytheistics that are having statues or altars or different things that are worshiping or honoring things that are not God or Jesus. So I get that piece. But let's look specifically at the word, again, sorcerer. Now, in this case, Greek was the original. And I don't even know how to pronounce this word either. But if we look at the original Greek word and we look at what they were doing, they were dealing, that word is the root word, which becomes pharmaceutical or pharmacy today. And it was associated with, again, drugs, poisons, and potions. And the magic that was associated with it was typically like curses or charms, love potions, and invoking beings and spirituals, and it often involved idolatry and forbidden in Jewish law with these practices. So again, we are talking about individuals who are practicing unsavory forms of magic, which even by today's standards, those who are polytheistic or in the neo-pagan community have unsavory practices which we have no interest in doing. Granted, it depends on the individual. Then if we take a look at what modern people are doing today, because witchcraft, witch, is constantly used as a translation for some of these that is a more well-known term than some of the other magical terms out there. The term witch today doesn't mean what it used to mean, because originally when we translated the word witcha or witche into witch in Old English, we were basically using that to denote these types of beings as well. So it was part of the modern translation to encompass any of these acts which are unknown that seem dangerous or deadly. So when it was first used, the term witchcraft and witch was used to denote evil practitioners of magic. However, the modern witch, the self-proclaimed witch today, is part of the revival movement that started sometime in the late 1800s-ish, and especially in the early 1900s. Through the 1900s and 2000s and into the present, people started to reclaim the word to refer to individuals who were doing a combination of three major practices: Hermetics, Kabbalah, yes, Jewish mysticism, and folk traditions and customs which live on today. Some of these practices are in fact used within different types of people and culture, including those who are Christian, which is why you have Christian witches today, because of the methods they go about in its use. A lot of the modern rituals, magic, and spells that people use today can also be traced back to Christian spell books by individuals like Francis Barrett with the Magus, or you even have Franz Barden's Introduction to Hermetics, which again has a Christian flair to it. There is a Christian moral lens on a lot of the things that are done today, even within the magic neo-pagan spiritual community. So my main point is, if you take what they were shaming and outlawing and saying that it is evil for that time period, which we might even consider evil today, and compare it to what your average neo-pagan, polytheist, Wiccan, witch, druid, sorcerer, wizard, mage, warlock is doing today, it's vastly different than what they were doing back then. Yes, there's exceptions. There's some people doing some pretty unsavory things today. But the vast majority of the people are doing stuff like honoring nature, which Christians kind of do anyway, because it's God's creation, right? Or they're doing stuff where some of them do incorporate where they believe in spiritual entities within nature itself, but isn't that kind of God? Because God is omnipresent everywhere anyway. So maybe that's just a misunderstanding or interpretation there. And then they're putting forth their will. Like when someone does a protection, like, yes, you can technically pray to Jesus or God and ask for Jesus' grace and protection, and that should be enough for you. But individuals who are practicing magic itself, if you're putting that intent out there, that's basically what they're doing. They're thinking and focusing their thoughts on a goal, and they're letting it flow out of them like a feeling or emotion or vibration. And then some of them will enhance that through different forms of ritual, whether it be using herbs or candles, rocks, stones, circle casting, chanting, whatever the case may be. But it's about pushing that energy forward. It's when we start getting into the unsavory use of substances or taking of lives, whether that be human or animal life, or working with blood or the dead, that we start getting questionable. Or when we start summoning or invoking, not evoking, but invoking spirits for control or power. In fact, the Key of Solomon has spells for binding both demons and angels to your will. Again, if you look at the origin of where this stuff comes from and what the practices were themselves, you might find some things that you, as a modern, magical, neo-pagan, polytheistic practitioner of some form, might cringe at as well. You might look at some things and be like, I would never want to do that. That's what the Christians are actually condemning. So if the Christians took a few moments to speak with the polytheists, they might realize it's not really that bad what they're doing. Sure, they're not finding Jesus as their Lord and Savior. Some of them are, like I said. But what they're doing is not as evil and demonic as you might assume it is. Likewise, if you are a neo-pagan, polytheist or some form, the Christians don't actually hate you. They're not necessarily condemning you for your practices. They probably are assuming you're doing things that you're probably not doing anyway. So take a few moments to converse and talk, hear opposing viewpoints, and take a real look at yourself and realize we're both human beings. We're both here in this world, and we're trying to discover and understand what the divine is. The divine, the divinity, the creator. Maybe it is God. Maybe it's multiple gods. Maybe it's so complex that your ability to understand one omnipresent being is not something that you're capable of comprehending. So maybe you have different aspects, or maybe it appears in different forms so you can comprehend it better. Who are we to say? Anyway, that's my few thoughts. That's the way I've interpreted these two passages in the Bible, that they're not actually talking about what we're doing today. And what we're doing today is not the same thing as what pagans were doing in the past. Neo-pagans, polytheists were doing in the past, some of these different practices. A lot of what was done is no longer practiced. Yes, I can get it. There's exceptions and there's some savory stuff. But you'd be surprised how many of these practices that you're assuming are evil, satanic, or demonic are in fact nothing to do with that. And it's not just, well, I don't believe in Satan, so I don't do anything with Satan. It's what they're doing, I believe, is possibly something that even Jesus would be okay with if it's done from a place of peace and love. Maybe something to consider, some food for thoughts. Anyway, put your comments below. Are you a biblical scholar? Do you study the Bible? Are you a Christian and have you read the Bible? Or are you polytheistic, neo-pagan? Doesn't matter. If you have an opinion, share it below. What are your thoughts? What do you think of these interpretations of the Bible? Do you think it's cut and dry and I'm completely wrong? Why? Do you think I'm onto something? Or is this just a silly video and you just don't really care? So anyway, thank you for watching. May your path be a fruitful one, and I will catch you in the next one.